Mother's Day became the day my sons destroyed me. I can still see the plates crashing on the floor, the smell of burning chicken from the oven, and the sound of my own heart pounding in my chest. My two sons, my flesh and blood, the very reason I worked so hard all these years, stood in front of me with eyes that no longer looked like mine. They shouted at me, louder than the storm outside. Words so sharp that they cut through my chest deeper than any knife could. "Stop lying to us, Mother," they screamed in unison. One of them, James, lifted his hand like he was about to strike me. The other, Daniel, had already broken the vase that had belonged to my mother, their grandmother, who I loved dearly. It was a gift she left me before she passed, and now it lay in pieces on the wooden floor. I could not breathe. My knees buckled. My lips trembled. And just when I thought the pain of their words was enough, they said something that pierced me deeper than anything else. "You're dead to us." The room spun. My body felt weak. The house that had once been filled with love, laughter, and bedtime stories now echoed with destruction and hate. My Mother's Day gift wasn't flowers or hugs, or breakfast in bed. My gift was betrayal. And that was the moment on Mother's Day of all days, that my sons destroyed me. But how did it come to this? How did the two boys I carried in my womb, the ones I nursed, protected, and sacrificed for, turn into the very people who broke my soul? To understand this story, you need to know me first. My name is Margaret Green, and I live in a small town in Ohio, United States of America. I'm 67 years old, a grandmother now, though you wouldn't know it by the way I still move around the house trying to keep everything together. Before I go any further, I want to say this. If you love stories full of suspense, pain, and life lessons, please don't forget to subscribe, like this story, and click the notification button so you never miss the next chapter. And tell me from which part of the country you are watching from. I really want to know. Now let me take you back. It all started many years ago, before my boys ever raised their voices at me. Back when I believed love was enough to conquer everything. I was a young woman then, barely 20, living in a world where dreams felt bigger than my pocket could hold. I married young, too young maybe, and I thought the man I married was going to be my happily ever after. His name was Richard. Richard was tall, strong, and handsome. Everyone in our neighborhood admired him. But behind closed doors, Richard was not the man people thought he was. He had a temper that flared at the smallest things, and when he drank, which was often, he became someone I barely recognized. But I stayed. Why? Because I believed that if I loved him enough, if I prayed hard enough, he would change. And besides, when you are young, you believe suffering is part of building a family. Then came James, my first son. He was the light of my life. The moment he cried for the first time, I promised myself I would give him everything. I wanted him to have the kind of love I never had growing up. A year later, Daniel came. 2 boys, 2 little blessings. I thought maybe, just maybe, God had given me a second chance at happiness. But happiness doesn't last long when it is built on shaky ground. Richard's temper grew worse. He never lifted a hand on me, but his words. Oh, his words could break bones without leaving a mark. He called me useless, worthless, stupid. And he didn't stop there. Sometimes he spoke those same words in front of our sons. That was the wound that cut the deepest. One night, when James was only 10 and Daniel was 9, Richard came home drunk. He shouted, threw his shoes at the wall, and said things no child should ever hear their father say about their mother. That night, I made a decision that changed the course of our lives forever. I left him. It wasn't easy. I had no money, no job, and 2 boys who were too young to understand why their father wasn't around anymore. We moved into a small apartment, so small that the kitchen and living room were practically the same thing. I worked 2 jobs, one at a diner during the day, and one cleaning offices at night. I barely slept. I barely ate. But my sons had food, clothes, and went to school. I thought they understood. I thought they saw how hard I worked. I thought they would grow up grateful. But children don't always see sacrifices. Sometimes all they see is what they don't have. While other kids wore new sneakers, my boys wore secondhand shoes. While other families went on vacations, we stayed home because I couldn't afford it. I tried to make it fun. Movie nights in the living room with popcorn, walks in the park, and board games. But the world outside our little apartment told them they were missing out. James grew bitter first. He began to blame me for everything. When he was 14, he shouted, "If you hadn't left Dad, we wouldn't be poor." Those words stung more than any insult from Richard ever had. Daniel followed. He was quieter than James, but silence can be louder than screams. He stopped talking to me, stopped hugging me, stopped calling me mom the way he used to. And still I pressed on. I believed in time they would see the truth, that I had done everything for them. Years passed. They became men. They went to college. I thought maybe their distance was just part of growing up. Maybe, when they became fathers themselves, they would understand me. But then came that one Mother's Day. I had cooked a big meal: chicken, mashed potatoes, corn, biscuits, and even a chocolate cake. I decorated the table with flowers, thinking we would laugh, talk, and maybe heal the gaps in our relationship. Instead, that was the day my sons destroyed me. And just as James's hand rose in the air, just as Daniel shouted words that no mother should ever hear, something happened that none of us expected. The front door creaked open. And what I saw standing there froze my blood. The front door creaked open, and there stood a shadow from my past, Richard. I thought I was dreaming. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. My sons froze too, their anger silenced for a moment. There he was, the man I had once loved, the man who had torn my life apart, standing inside my home as if he had never left. His hair was grayer, his shoulders heavier, but his eyes, oh, his eyes were the same cold steel that haunted me years ago. "Well, well," Richard said, his voice deep and mocking. "Look at this happy little family reunion." My knees nearly gave out. For a second, I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. What was he doing here? After all these years, after all the pain, why now? Why on Mother's Day? James and Daniel didn't look angry anymore. No. Their faces softened when they saw him. My heart broke all over again. They rushed to him, both of them, like little boys running to their hero. James hugged him first, Daniel next. "Dad," they both said, almost in unison. Dad. That word sliced through me like a knife. For years, I had raised them alone. For years, I had been the one to put food on the table, wipe their tears, and sacrifice everything. And yet, in a single breath, they gave him the title of love that I had carried on my back for decades. Richard smirked at me over their shoulders. He didn't have to say anything. I already knew what that look meant. Victory. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, my voice shaking. He patted James on the back and looked around the room like he owned it. I heard my sons wanted the truth, and I came to give it to them. The truth. My stomach churned. I knew Richard's truth. It was made of lies, twisted words, and poison. But my boys, blinded by anger at me, were ready to believe anything he said. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull my sons away from him, to shield them like I once did when they were small. But before I could move, James turned to me with tears in his eyes. "Why didn't you ever tell us the real reason you left him, Mom?" he demanded. Daniel's voice followed, soft but sharp. "What else have you been hiding?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Richard raised his hand like a conductor ready to lead an orchestra. "Let me tell them, Margaret," he said with a grin. "Let me tell them what kind of woman their mother really is." And in that moment, my son stepped closer to him, and further away from me. I felt the walls closing in, the house spinning. Mother's Day wasn't just ruined anymore. It was turning into the day the last pieces of my family would be ripped apart. And then Richard began to speak. Richard cleared his throat the way he always did before he told one of his stories. I knew that sound too well. It was the same throat clearing I heard when he was about to lie to his boss, to neighbors, or even to me when we were still married. My heart pounded in my chest, but my sons stood there like eager students waiting for a teacher to speak. "You see, boys," Richard began, leaning against the doorframe like he owned the house, "your mother didn't just leave me. No. She destroyed our family. She made choices that tore us apart. And then, to cover her tracks, she spun a story that painted me as the villain." I wanted to shout, "That's not true," but the words caught in my throat. I could see how James and Daniel's eyes lit up. They were hungry for answers, for something to explain the years of sacrifice they had never understood. "What choices?" James asked quickly. Richard smiled, that cruel smile I hated. "She'll tell you she left because I was angry, or because I drank too much." But the truth, boys, the truth is she wanted a different life. She wanted freedom. She wanted someone else. My stomach twisted. I shook my head violently. That's a lie, Richard. Don't you dare put that in their heads. But Daniel looked at me suspiciously. Is it true, Mom? Did you have someone else? The room tilted. My own sons were questioning my loyalty, my sacrifice, my love. I had never looked at another man. Never. Everything I did for them. And now, one poisonous sentence from Richard was undoing decades of motherhood. No. I shouted, my voice cracking. No, Daniel. I never betrayed your father. I never betrayed you. I left because you were selfish, Richard cut in smoothly, finishing my sentence like he always used to. She thought raising 2 boys was too much. She thought she deserved better. That's why she dragged you into poverty. That's why you grew up without a father. It wasn't me who abandoned you. It was her. The silence in the room was deafening. My sons stared at me, and for the first time in years, I couldn't read their eyes. James's fists clenched. All those years. I blamed Dad. I hated him for leaving. But maybe. He stopped mid-sentence, his voice breaking. Maybe it was you all along. James, no. I stepped forward, reaching for him. But he pulled back as if my touch burned him. Daniel's face was pale. His hands shook. If that's true, Mom, if you lied to us our whole lives. Tears streamed down my face. I didn't lie. I protected you. I saved you from a man who would have crushed your spirit. You were just too young to see it. Richard laughed, a deep, cruel laugh that filled the room. Protected them? Ha. Boys, does this look like protection to you? A tiny apartment? Hand-me-down shoes? A mother who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't give you the life you deserved? She didn't protect you. She punished you for her choices. Every word he spoke was poison, and my sons drank it. James slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. Why didn't you tell us, Mom? Why did you keep all this from us? We had a right to know. I didn't tell you because you were children. Cried out. You needed love, not war. I thought when you grew older, you would understand that sometimes silence is love. Sometimes sacrifice means keeping the pain away from your children's eyes. But they didn't understand. Not now. Maybe not ever. Daniel turned to Richard, his voice trembling. Dad, is it true? Did she really leave you for another man? Richard put his hand over his heart in mock sincerity. I swear to you, sons, that's what happened. She left me. She chose herself over this family. I gasped. You liar. I lunged forward, grabbing Richard's arm. Tell them the truth. Tell them about your drinking. Tell them about your temper. Tell them about the nights you made us all cry. For a moment, Richard's mask slipped. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. But then he quickly composed himself, smirking once again. See? She's hysterical. This is the woman who raised you. Always dramatic, always making herself the victim. And just like that, my sons pulled away from me even more. James's voice was cold. Maybe you're the liar, Mom. Maybe all those years, you just wanted us to hate Dad. No, James, I whispered, my heart shattering. I wanted you to be safe. That's all I ever wanted. The tension in the room was unbearable. My Mother's Day dinner lay untouched on the table. The flowers wilted under the heat of the argument. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I was losing my sons. But before I could say another word, Richard leaned closer to them and whispered something I couldn't hear. Both boys nodded slowly, their eyes fixed on me with a mixture of anger and disgust. Then James spoke the words that nearly killed me. Maybe we shouldn't stay here tonight. Maybe we should go with Dad. The floor seemed to vanish under me. My legs buckled. My chest tightened. No, they couldn't leave me. Not now. Not with him. Please, I begged, my voice breaking. Please don't go with him. He doesn't love you. He'll use you. He'll hurt you the way he hurt me. Please, sons, please don't do this. But James's face was stone. Daniel's eyes were wet, but he didn't move toward me. Richard opened his arms wide, smiling like the devil himself. Come on, boys. Let's get out of here. Let's leave your mother to her lies. And then, without another word, They stepped toward him. My heart stopped. My hands shook. The world around me blurred. I screamed, "Don't you dare take my sons away from me." But Richard only laughed, his arm around both their shoulders. And as they moved closer to the door, I realized something horrifying. Mother's Day wasn't just the day my sons destroyed me. It was becoming the day I lost them forever. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching as Richard wrapped his arms around my sons like he had earned the right to protect them. My legs felt heavy like they were chained to the floor. My heart wanted to chase after them, to pull them back into my arms, but my body would not move. Fear rooted me in place. "Let's go, boys," Richard said smoothly, his voice dripping with false charm. "You don't need to waste any more time here." James didn't even look at me. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the door as though he couldn't stand another second in my presence. Daniel hesitated, his hand trembling on the doorknob. For a brief moment I thought maybe, just maybe, he would turn around, see my tears, and remember all the nights I stayed awake nursing him through fevers or saving pennies to buy him Christmas gifts. But then Richard whispered something in his ear, and the hesitation disappeared. Daniel opened the door. Cold air rushed into the room, chilling my skin, but the icy wind in my chest was far worse. They stepped out one by one, leaving me behind. "No!" I screamed, finding my strength at last. I stumbled toward the door, reaching out with shaking hands. "Don't do this. Don't go with him. Please, I beg you." Daniel turned his head slightly, his eyes glistening, but he didn't speak. James pulled him forward, and just like that, they were gone. The door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. My house, once filled with the smell of warm food and the hope of laughter, now felt like a tomb. I pressed my palms against the door and slid to the floor, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. Mother's Day, the one day in the year when a mother dreams of hugs, love, and gratitude, had become the day my heart was ripped out. As the tears blurred my vision, a thought crept into my mind, dark, unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. What if they never come back? What if this is the last time I see them? I shook my head violently, refusing to believe it. No, they were my sons. Blood of my blood. They couldn't just walk away and erase me. Richard was a snake, yes, but surely the truth would shine through eventually. Surely my boys would remember who had raised them. Still, another fear lingered. What lies would Richard pour into their ears once he had them alone? What poison would he feed them until there was nothing left of the bond between us? I dragged myself to the kitchen table, collapsing into a chair. The untouched meal sat before me. Chicken, biscuits, mashed potatoes, all mocking me with their silence. I stared at the empty plates, at the flowers that now looked wilted and useless, and whispered into the air, "Dear God, don't let this be the end. Please, don't let me lose my sons forever." And just then the phone rang. The phone rang so suddenly that I nearly jumped out of my chair. My heart pounded as the sound echoed through the silent house. For a second, I just stared at it, my mind racing with possibilities. Could it be James or Daniel calling me? Had they come to their senses so quickly? Or was it Richard, gloating and ready to drive the knife even deeper? My hands shook as I picked up the receiver. "Hello," I whispered, my voice still raw from crying. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't expected. "Margaret? It's Linda." Relief and disappointment crashed into me at the same time. Linda was my closest friend, my neighbor for over 20 years. She had seen me through heartbreak, through sickness, and even through the years of raising James and Daniel alone. If anyone understood me, it was her. "Linda." I choked on her name, tears rising again. "They left. My boys, they walked out with him." Her voice softened immediately. "Oh, Margaret. I'm so sorry. I saw them getting into a car with Richard just now. I thought I must have been seeing things. Are you all right?" "All right." I laughed bitterly, though it sounded more like a sob. "No, I'm not all right. Today was supposed to be Mother's Day, and instead it's turned into a nightmare. My sons believe him, Linda. They believe his lies." There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then she said, "I don't want to upset you, but maybe this is the fight you've been avoiding all along. Maybe it's time you finally told them everything." I frowned, confused. "Everything? You never told them the full truth about Richard," Linda said gently. About the nights you came to my house with bruises, not from his fists, but from the way he shoved you into walls. About the times you hid in my basement with the boys because you were scared he'd come home angry. They never knew, Margaret. You protected them from it, but maybe by protecting them, you made it easier for Richard to twist the story now. Her words cut deep because they were true. I had hidden so much. I had thought shielding my boys from their father's darkness was the right thing. But in doing so, I had created a blank page, and Richard was now filling it with lies. Linda, what if they never believe me? I whispered. Then you fight, she said firmly. You fight for your sons the way you always have. You can't just sit there and let him take them from you. You're their mother. If you don't tell your truth, he'll erase you from their lives completely. Her words lit a small flame in me. A flame I thought had died when the door slammed shut. I wiped my tears, sitting up straighter. She was right. If I stayed silent, I would lose them. I had to speak. I had to fight, no matter how much it hurt. Thank you, Linda. I said, my voice steadier. I don't know what I'd do without you. Just promise me one thing, she said softly. What's that? Don't let Richard win. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, her words echoing in my ears. Don't let Richard win. That was easier said than done. He had already poisoned their hearts. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I stood, pacing the floor, my mind racing. If I waited too long, Richard would sink his claws deeper into them. I needed to act now. But what could I do? Then I remembered something hidden in the back of my closet. A box. A box filled with memories I had locked away because they were too painful to revisit. Letters, photographs, and even a journal I had kept during those years. Proof of what really happened. My hands shook as I hurried to the bedroom and pulled the box from its hiding place. Dust covered the lid. My fingers trembled as I opened it, and the smell of old paper hit me like a wave of the past. I pulled out the journal first. My handwriting was shaky, rushed, filled with fear. Page after page told the story of nights filled with shouting, of Richard's rages, of the times I had to shield my boys from his storms. Tears blurred my vision as I read, but I knew this journal was my weapon. Then came the letters Richard had written me in drunken guilt, apologizing for his anger, for his words, for his failures as a husband and father. Proof in his own handwriting of the man he really was. And finally photographs, one in particular of me with a swollen cheek, holding Daniel, who had been only a toddler then. I had hidden that picture away for years, too ashamed to let anyone see. But now it might save my family. I gathered everything into a bag, my mind set. If my boys couldn't believe my words, maybe they would believe the truth written down, the evidence left behind. But just as I zipped the bag shut, I heard a sound outside. A car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced. For a wild second I thought maybe, just maybe, it was James and Daniel come back to me. But as I moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't my sons. It was Richard. Alone. And he was walking toward my front door. The knock on the door was slow and deliberate, like he knew I was standing there trembling on the other side. My hands clenched the straps of the bag I had just packed, the evidence of years of pain pressing against my chest. Margaret, Richard's voice drawled, smooth as poison. Open up. We need to talk. Every instinct in me screamed don't. I backed away from the door, my heartbeat thundering so loudly I thought he might hear it. I know you're in there, he said again, knocking harder this time. The boys are with me now. You can't hide anymore. Let me in, or I'll tell them even more things about you they'll never forgive. Tears welled in my eyes, but I wiped them quickly. No, not this time. I wouldn't cower. Linda's words echoed in my head. Don't let Richard win. With shaking hands I unlocked the door. It creaked open and there he was, Richard, older but no less dangerous. His smirk widened as he stepped inside uninvited. Still the same house, he said, glancing around. Still clinging to the past, aren't you? What do you want, Richard? I asked, my voice low but firm. He chuckled. Straight to the point. Fine. I want what I deserve. My sons. My family back. And for you? Silence. You stay out of the way and maybe, just maybe, they'll keep visiting you out of pity. The audacity made my blood boil. You don't deserve them, I spat. You gave up that right the day you let your anger destroy this family. His eyes darkened, the smirk fading. He stepped closer until I could smell the faint trace of alcohol on his breath. Careful, Margaret. You think those boys will believe your version of the story? They already chose me. I've planted enough seeds in their heads that they'll never trust you again. My grip tightened on the bag at my side. I wanted to hurl the journal and letters in his face, to show him I wasn't powerless anymore. But something inside me said wait. Timing was everything. If I revealed my proof too soon, he might twist even that. You'll regret this, I whispered. Richard tilted his head, almost amused. No, Margaret. You will. And then he noticed the bag. His eyes narrowed. What's in there? He asked, stepping closer. Panic surged in my chest. If he got his hands on that bag, my only chance at saving my sons would be gone. I pulled it behind me, forcing a shaky smile. Nothing. Just old junk. But he didn't believe me. His eyes gleamed with suspicion, and before I could stop him, he lunged forward, reaching for it. Richard's hand shot forward like a snake, aiming for the bag clutched against my chest. Instinct took over. I spun away, clutching it tighter, my heart hammering like a drum. Give it to me, Margaret, he growled, his voice sharp and low. Whatever's in that bag doesn't belong to you anymore. It's mine, I snapped, backing toward the kitchen. Stay away from me. But Richard was quick. Age had slowed him a little, but his anger made him faster. He lunged again, his fingers brushing against the strap. I twisted my body, slamming my hip into the edge of the table. Pain shot up my side, but I didn't let go. You think you can fight me? He hissed. After all these years, you still don't know when to quit. My breathing came fast and shallow. I know exactly when to quit, Richard. That's why I left you. But I'll never quit on my sons. The mention of them seemed to ignite him. His face reddened, and his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. He stepped forward again, but this time I shoved the chair between us, creating a barrier. You don't get to decide their lives anymore, I said firmly, though my voice trembled at the edges. You already destroyed too much. He sneered. Destroyed? I gave them everything. A name. A father. A legacy. And what did you give them, Margaret? Poverty. Embarrassment. A broken home. I felt the tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not now. Not in front of him. I gave them love, I said quietly. Real love. Something you'll never understand. For the first time, his smirk faltered. It was only for a second, but I saw it. A flicker of the man who once begged for forgiveness in his drunken letters. The man who once cried after realizing he had scared his children. But the softness vanished quickly, replaced by cold steel. He slammed his hand on the table, making the plates and cutlery jump. You think love will save you now? No. The only thing that matters is what they believe. And right now, Margaret, they believe me. He stepped around the chair, closing the distance between us. My back hit the wall. There was nowhere else to go. The bag pressed tightly against my chest, my last shield. Show me what's in that bag, he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Or I'll make sure they never come back to this house again. Fear coiled in my stomach, but then Linda's words echoed in my mind once more. Don't let Richard win. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze. You'll never touch this bag, Richard. Inside is the truth you've spent your life running from. And when the boys see it, your lies will crumble. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed into slits. You're bluffing. I shook my head slowly. Am I? For a moment, the air between us crackled with tension. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Then suddenly he lunged again. His hands clamped around the strap, pulling hard. I screamed, clutching it tighter, the struggle ripping through my body like a storm. Let go, he shouted, his spit hitting my face. Never. I screamed back, yanking with all the strength my weary arms could muster. The two of us tugged violently, the bag swinging between us like the prize in a cruel game. My shoulder screamed with pain. His grip tightened, his face twisted with rage. And then snap! The strap tore. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall, the bag clutched desperately to my chest. Richard staggered too, but his eyes burned with fury. "You don't know what you're doing, Margaret," he snarled. "You think that bag will save you? All it will do is destroy what little respect your sons still have for you. They'll see you for the bitter, pathetic woman you really are." I shook my head violently, clutching the bag tighter. "No, Richard. They'll see the truth. And the truth is, you were never a father. You were a coward who used fear as love." His hand rose suddenly, his palm open. For a terrifying moment I thought he would strike me. My whole body froze, bracing for the blow I had escaped for decades. But then he stopped. His hand trembled in the air, then slowly lowered. "You're not worth it," he spat. "You never were." His words cut, but I stood taller, refusing to flinch. "Then leave my house. Now." For a moment I thought he might refuse. His eyes darted to the bag again, but I held it firmly, showing him he had lost this battle. Finally, with a sharp breath, he turned and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, he glanced back, his voice dripping with venom. "Enjoy your little victory, Margaret. But don't forget, the boys are with me now. And no bag of old papers will change the way they see you." The door slammed so hard the walls rattled. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't empty. My hand shook as I clutched the bag tighter. Fear lingered, yes, but beneath it burned something stronger. Determination. I had the proof. I had the truth. And I would use it. But even as I stood there, trying to steady my breath, another thought chilled me. Richard wasn't the type to walk away easily. If he couldn't steal the bag tonight, he would find another way to silence me. And next time he might not come alone. The night dragged on in silence, but sleep never came. I sat in the living room with the bag clutched on my lap, staring at the clock as its hands crawled past midnight. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow outside the window felt like Richard returning. But what haunted me most wasn't the fear of him. It was the image of James and Daniel walking away from me, their shoulders pressed against his, as if I had never been part of their lives. By dawn, my eyes were raw from crying. I brewed coffee I couldn't drink, my hands trembling too much to lift the cup. When the sun finally rose, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. If Richard had already begun twisting the truth deeper into their hearts, then time was running out. I reached for the phone, ready to call James. My fingers hovered above the buttons when headlights swept across the window. My chest tightened. Another car in the driveway. I rushed to the window, my heart leaping into my throat. This time it wasn't Richard's old truck. It was James's car. He had come back. I pressed my hand to my mouth, holding back a sob as I watched him step out. But the relief was short-lived, because Daniel stepped out next, his face pale and unreadable. They walked slowly to the door, their footsteps heavy, as if weighed down by uncertainty. The knock came soft this time. I hurried to open it, my breath caught in my chest. There they stood, my sons. My boys. My heart wanted to grab them, pull them into my arms and never let go. But their eyes stopped me. James's gaze was cold, guarded. Daniel's was softer but full of confusion. "Mom," James said flatly, "we need to talk." My knees nearly buckled at his voice. Still I stepped aside, motioning them in. The untouched plates from last night still sat on the table, a painful reminder of how it all began. They walked in slowly, looking around as if the house felt foreign to them now. Neither sat. Neither smiled. I swallowed hard. "I'm glad you came back." James's jaw clenched. "We didn't come back. We came for answers." Daniel finally spoke, his voice shaky. "Dad told us things last night. Things that, if they're true, then you've been lying to us our whole lives." Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was my moment. My chance to fight. I reached down, lifted the bag, and set it gently on the table between us. "Then it's time you saw the truth for yourselves." Their eyes flicked to the bag, then back to me. James narrowed his eyes. "What's in there?" My hand rested on the zipper. My heart thundered. "Everything your father never wanted you to know." And as I began to unzip it, the front door creaked open again. The creak of the front door froze us all in place. My fingers stopped on the zipper of the bag. James stiffened, his fists curling at his sides, and Daniel's eyes darted toward the sound. And then, just as I feared, Richard walked in like he owned the place. He didn't knock this time. He didn't hesitate. He strolled right inside, his boots heavy against the floor, a smirk spreading across his face as he saw us gathered at the table. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he drawled. "A little family meeting and you didn't invite me." My blood ran cold. I had locked that door after he left last night. I was sure of it. Yet here he was. "Dad," James said quickly, his voice tight, "we came here to get answers." Richard's smirk widened. "And you'll get them, son. From me. Not from her." He nodded toward me with disdain, as if I were an intruder in my own home. I stood, clutching the bag protectively. "You're not welcome here, Richard. Leave." But he ignored me. His eyes were on James and Daniel. "Boys, whatever she's about to show you, whatever she's stuffed in that bag, don't let her fool you. She's been twisting the story for years. You think a few old scraps of paper will change the truth you've already seen with your own eyes." "Dad, stop," Daniel said softly, but Richard's gaze was unyielding. "No, son. You need to hear this. She's desperate. That bag isn't proof of anything. It's just her way of clinging to control. Don't let her manipulate you." His words dripped poison, and I could see them seeping into James's mind. James's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking between me and his father. "Mom," James said slowly, "if you really have proof, then show it. Right now. Or I'm walking out of this house, and I won't come back." My chest ached at his words, but I nodded. My hands trembled as I placed the bag on the table and pulled the zipper all the way open. Richard moved closer, but I lifted my hand sharply. "Stay back." For the first time in a long while he obeyed. I pulled out the first item, my old journal, its pages yellowed with time. "I wrote this during the years we lived with him," I said, my voice steadying as I spoke. "Every night, after you boys went to sleep, I wrote down what happened. His rages. His drinking. The nights I had to hide you." James's brow furrowed. Daniel leaned closer, curious. I opened the journal to a page marked with a tear stain. My voice shook as I read. "Tonight Richard came home angry again." James hid under the bed, trembling. Daniel cried until he fell asleep in my arms. I told them it was going to be okay, but inside I was terrified. I don't know how much longer I can protect them. Silence filled the room. James's face darkened. Daniel's lip trembled. "That's her version," Richard cut in quickly, his tone sharp. "Anyone can write anything in a book. Doesn't make it true." Ignoring him, I reached into the bag again. This time I pulled out a stack of letters, folded and yellowed with age. "These are from him," I said, placing them on the table. "Drunken apologies he wrote me after nights he couldn't remember. Read them. They're in his handwriting." James hesitated, but Daniel picked one up, unfolding it with shaking hands. His voice cracked as he read aloud. "I'm sorry for last night. I don't know what came over me. I swear I'll change, Margaret. Please don't take the boys away from me." He stopped, his hands trembling. His eyes lifted to Richard's, searching for answers. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Those were private. I was drunk. I didn't mean those words." "Drunk or not," I said firmly, "you wrote the truth." Finally, I pulled out the last piece. A photograph, creased but clear. In it, I was holding Daniel, barely a toddler, my cheeks swollen and bruised. My shame. My secret. The one thing I never wanted them to see. I placed it gently on the table. Daniel gasped. James's eyes widened. "No," Richard said quickly, his voice rising. "That bruise wasn't me. She must have staged that. You think she wouldn't go that far to make me look bad? Enough." My voice rose louder than I thought possible. My hands slammed on the table. "Stop lying, Richard. You know what you did. You know the pain you caused. And you know I stayed silent all these years because I didn't want my boys to grow up hating their father. But you left me no choice. If you want to destroy me, fine. But you will not destroy the truth." The room fell into a heavy silence. My chest heaved with every breath. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "Dad, did you really do this?" Richard's mouth opened, but no words came. His face twisted, caught between rage and fear. James's fists clenched. He looked at me, then at the photograph again. His lips parted as if to speak, but before he could, Richard slammed his fist onto the table, sending the journal and letters scattering. "You'll regret this, Margaret," he roared. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot." And with that, he stormed out of the house, the door slamming so hard the frame rattled. The silence he left behind was deafening. My son stood frozen, staring at the evidence scattered across the table. Finally James spoke, his voice low, almost broken. "Mom, why didn't you tell us sooner?" I swallowed hard, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Because I wanted you to grow up loving your father, even if he didn't deserve it." Daniel reached for my hand, his eyes wet. But James's face was harder to read. His anger now tangled with confusion and guilt. And in that moment I realized something painful. The battle with Richard wasn't over. Even with the truth laid bare, my sons were torn between the past they thought they knew and the reality I had just shown them. And the next move they made could decide everything. The silence in the room was unbearable. Papers and letters lay scattered across the table, the photograph sitting on top like a wound no one wanted to touch. Daniel's hand still held mine, trembling, his eyes full of sorrow. "Mom, I don't know what to say. All these years." His voice broke and he looked away, tears sliding down his cheeks. My heart squeezed at his pain, but James was different. He stood stiff, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. His jaw clenched, his eyes hard. "So that's it," James said bitterly. "You've been hiding this our whole lives? You let us hate you, blame you, fight with you, when you had proof the whole time." I swallowed, my throat dry. "James, I wasn't hiding it to hurt you. I was protecting you. I didn't want you to carry the weight of your father's sins." "Protecting us?" he snapped. His voice shook with rage. "You lied to us. That's not protection, Mom. That's betrayal." Daniel flinched at his words. "James, don't." "No." James cut him off, his voice cracking. "I spent years hating her. Years thinking she ruined everything. Do you know how that feels? To believe your mother destroyed your family? And now she says she could have cleared it all up, but she chose silence? What kind of mother does that?" His words sliced through me, each one sharper than the last. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to stay strong. The kind of mother who sacrificed her own happiness for her children's innocence. I thought silence would give you peace. I see now, maybe it gave you pain instead. James shook his head, his breathing heavy. He grabbed the photograph off the table and held it up, his hand trembling. "This changes everything, but it doesn't erase the years of lies." "James," Daniel pleaded, his voice desperate. "She did it for us. Can't you see that? Look at what Dad just did tonight. He barged in here, tried to take the bag, tried to twist the story again. Doesn't that tell you who he really is?" But James's eyes were cold. He dropped the photo back onto the table with a thud. "I don't know who to believe anymore. Him. You. Both of you lied in different ways. Maybe there is no truth." My knees nearly buckled. "James, please." But before I could say another word, he stormed toward the door. "Where are you going?" Daniel called after him. James's hand gripped the doorknob tightly. He didn't look back as he said, "I need to hear Dad's side again. I won't believe anything until I do." And with that, he yanked the door open and walked out, leaving me and Daniel standing in stunned silence. The door slammed shut, and in that moment I knew. The war for my sons wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The night air was cool and heavy as James walked down the gravel road toward his car. His footsteps were fast, angry, echoing his thoughts. The photograph, the journal, the letters, they swirled in his mind, refusing to settle. He wanted to believe his mother. He wanted to accept that the bruises and the fear were real. But another part of him, a bigger part, felt betrayed. She had hidden the truth, let him grow up believing lies. And if she could do that, what else might she be hiding? He clenched his fists as he reached the car. His reflection in the window stared back at him, angry, tired, confused. He slammed the door shut, turned the key, and drove. The only place he knew to go was his father's house. When James pulled into Richard's driveway, the old porch light was already on, as if his father had been waiting. Richard stepped out of the house, his frame tall against the light. His expression was calm, almost too calm. "James," he said warmly, as though nothing had happened. I figured you'd come. James didn't answer. He shoved his hands into his pockets, his jaw tight. I need answers. Richard nodded, motioning him inside. Then let's talk. The living room smelled faintly of whiskey, though no glass was in sight. Richard had tidied up, no clutter, no mess. It was almost staged, as if he wanted James to see only order and control. They sat across from each other, the silence stretching until James finally spoke. She showed us everything. Journals. Letters. A picture of her bruised face. Richard leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Then he sighed heavily, shaking his head. Of course she did. That's her way. Always dredging up the past, twisting it into her story. James's brow furrowed. Are you saying it's not true? I'm saying, Richard said slowly, that your mother has always been dramatic. Yes, I drank. Yes, we fought. But those letters? Those journals? They're her version. You know your mother. Always scribbling things down, always keeping score. Do you really think she never exaggerated? James wanted to protest, but the doubt was already creeping in. He had seen his mother's tears, but he had also seen her stubbornness. And that bruise. Richard continued, his voice low and measured. Do you honestly believe I'd hit her while holding one of you in her arms? Think about that, son. Think carefully. That photo could have come from anywhere. Maybe she fell. Maybe she wanted to punish me. Can you say for sure? James shook his head, torn. She read us one of the letters. You apologized. You said you'd change. That sounds like guilt, Dad. Richard leaned forward, his eyes piercing. No, James. That was regret. Regret that I let alcohol get the better of me. Regret that I wasn't stronger for you boys. But guilt for beating her? Never. She's taking advantage of my weakness to make me look like a monster. Don't you see? James's chest tightened. His father's voice was steady, convincing. The certainty in his tone made James feel foolish for doubting him. Richard placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I know this is hard. You're caught between us. But you need to understand something. Your mother has always wanted control. When she left, she couldn't stand the idea of me having influence over you. That's why she poisoned you against me, little by little. And now, when she sees you drifting closer to me, she pulls out her bag of tricks. Old papers. Old wounds. Anything to win. James closed his eyes. The words sliced through him, feeding his confusion. His mother's pain had been real, but his father's conviction was unshakable. Richard squeezed his shoulder. You've seen me. You've lived with me. Do I look like the monster she describes? James opened his eyes, staring into his father's steady gaze. Richard looked strong, composed, even vulnerable. Nothing like the man in his mother's stories. No, James admitted quietly. You don't. Richard leaned back, satisfied. Exactly. You're old enough now to see the truth for yourself. Don't let her drag you back into her bitterness. You're my son, James. And I need you to stand with me. For once, I need you to choose. The words hung in the air like a challenge. James's throat tightened. Choose. Yes, Richard said firmly. Either you stand with me, or you let her tear this family apart all over again. Think about Daniel. Think about yourself. Do you want to live in the shadow of her anger, or do you want to move forward with me? James's pulse pounded in his ears. He thought of Daniel's tears, of his mother's trembling hands, of the bruised face in that photograph. Then he thought of his father now, strong, composed, offering him a future. I don't know, James whispered. Richard's eyes softened for the briefest moment. Take your time. But remember this. Your mother isn't the only one who can destroy people. If she keeps this up, she'll ruin you and your brother too. And I won't let that happen. James left his father's house an hour later, his mind a storm. The night air felt colder now, biting at his skin. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wanted the truth, but both versions felt like lies. And as he drove away, one thought gnawed at him. If his father was lying, he was the same monster his mother claimed. But if his mother was lying, then she was the one destroying everything. And James didn't know which betrayal would hurt more. Back at the house, I sat with Daniel in silence, both of us waiting, both of us afraid. And then, headlights swept across the window again. The headlights froze me in place. Daniel rose slowly from the couch, his eyes wide. We both knew who it had to be. The front door opened, and James stepped inside. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed, like he had been walking through a storm that hadn't yet passed. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there staring at me, then at Daniel. "James," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Did you talk to him?" James nodded stiffly. "Yeah, I did." The silence stretched. Daniel took a cautious step forward. "And?" James's jaw worked as if he were grinding words into dust before letting them out. Finally, he said, "I don't know who to believe anymore. He says you've been twisting everything to make him look like a monster. He says those letters, that picture, they don't prove what you think they do." I felt the air leave my lungs. "James, you saw them. You read them. You heard me." "And I heard him," James shot back. His voice cracked, anger spilling out. "He doesn't sound like a monster, Mom. He sounds like a man who made mistakes and regrets them. Do you know what that's like? To regret? Maybe you do. Maybe you regret keeping the truth from us for so long." Tears burned my eyes, but I held my ground. "I regret one thing, James. Protecting him for as long as I did. I thought I was shielding you, but all I did was leave you blind to what he really is." James turned away, pacing the room, his hands on his head. Daniel tried to step in, his voice soft. "James, look at how he acted last night. He didn't come here to talk. He came to take to control. That's not regret. That's who he really is." But James wasn't listening. His thoughts were too tangled, his heart too heavy. He spun around suddenly, his eyes blazing. "If you're telling the truth, then prove it in a way that can't be denied. No yernes. No old letters. Something solid. Otherwise," he swallowed hard. "Otherwise, I can't stand here and take sides." My heart pounded. "James, what more do you need?" His fists clenched. "The truth. Real proof. Not just words and faded memories." Before I could answer, there was a loud bang at the door. All three of us jumped. Daniel grabbed my arm, his face pale. James froze, staring. Another bang. Louder this time. And then Richard's voice thundered through the door. "Open up, Margaret. I'm not leaving until we finish this." The banging rattled the walls. Each strike felt like a hammer against my chest, echoing through the house until the air itself seemed to tremble. Daniel clutched my arm tighter, his nails digging into my sleeve, while James stood rooted to the floor, torn between fear and fury. "Open the door, Margaret," Richard bellowed, "or I'll break it down myself." My pulse roared in my ears. I turned to my sons, my voice low but steady. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't get in the middle." Another bang. Then another. The door groaned under the weight of his fists. James's face twisted, conflicted. "Mom, maybe we should just hear him out. If you keep shutting him out, it only proves his point." His words cut me, but I couldn't falter now. "James, this isn't about proving points. It's about survival. He's not here to talk. He's here to win." Before James could respond, the door burst open with a violent crack. The lock gave way, splintering the frame, and Richard stormed inside like a storm in boots. His face was red with rage, his eyes wild. "Where is it?" he shouted, his gaze darting straight to the bag still resting on the table. Daniel stepped in front of me instinctively, his arms spread as though to shield me. "Dad, stop," he cried. "This has to end." Richard ignored him. His eyes locked on mine. "You think you can turn my sons against me with your lies? You think some scribbled words and old photos mean anything?" He jabbed a finger toward the bag. "Give it to me, Margaret. Now." I stood tall, though my knees shook. "No. You had your chance last night and you failed. The truth stays here." His fists clenched at his sides. "You're going to regret this." James stepped forward suddenly, his voice shaking. "Dad, stop. Just listen for once. Mom's not lying. Maybe she exaggerated, maybe not, but we deserve to hear both sides without threats." Richard's head snapped toward him, his expression softening in an instant. "James, son. I'm doing this for you. For both of you. That bag doesn't contain truth. It contains poison. If she fills your head with it, You'll never look at me the same way again. Don't let her steal me from you." His words dripped with manipulation, but I could see them pulling at James, twisting deeper into his doubts. Daniel's voice broke the moment. "She's not stealing us. You are. Every time you storm in here, every time you try to control everything, you're the one tearing us apart." Richard's face hardened again, his jaw tightening. "You don't understand, Daniel. You never did. You've always been soft. That's why she clings to you. You're easy to bend." Daniel flinched, his lip trembling, but he didn't back down. "I'd rather be soft than cruel." For a brief second, pride swelled in my chest. My youngest trembling but brave. But then Richard lunged toward the table. I screamed, rushing forward, clutching the bag before his hands could close on it. We collided, his strength overwhelming, the force knocking me against the wall. My shoulder screamed with pain, but I didn't let go. James shouted, "Dad, stop!" and grabbed his arm. For the first time, father and son clashed physically, James straining to hold him back. "Let go of me!" Richard roared, twisting violently. His elbow struck James in the chest, sending him stumbling back. Daniel darted in to help, but I screamed at him, "Stay back!" The struggle grew wild. Richard yanked at the bag with all his might, his face inches from mine, his breath hot with rage. "You won't win, Margaret. You never win." Summoning every ounce of strength, I stomped my heel against his foot and shoved with all I had. He staggered back, surprised by the sudden force. James rushed in again, shoving his father away from me. "Enough. Stop this." His voice cracked with desperation. Richard turned on him, his eyes blazing. "Don't you dare raise your hand to me, boy. I'm your father. You owe me respect." James's chest heaved, his fists shaking. "Respect? You've done nothing to earn it. Not tonight. Not ever." The word struck harder than any blow. For the first time, Richard faltered, his face twisting with something like hurt. But it quickly hardened again. "You'll regret saying that," he hissed. "Both of you." Daniel finally stepped forward, his voice trembling but strong. "No, Dad. We regret ever believing you." The room went silent. The words hung heavy, impossible to take back. Richard's face darkened, his chest rising and falling with fury. Then, without warning, he spun and grabbed a glass from the counter, hurling it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 shards, the sound sharp as gunfire. Daniel cried out. I pulled him close instinctively, shielding him from the flying fragments. Richard stood there, his chest heaving, glass glittering at his feet. His eyes swept the room one last time, rage, pain, and something darker burning in them. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you've won because you've turned them against me. But I'll be back. And when I am, you'll wish you had given me that bag." With that, he stormed out, the broken door swinging in his wake. His truck roared to life outside, the engine growling as he sped away into the night. The silence that followed was suffocating. Shards of glass glittered like tiny stars on the floor. My hands shook as I held the bag against my chest. Daniel still clinging to me. James stood in the center of the room, his chest rising and falling, his eyes fixed on the broken door. Finally, he turned to me. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Mom, what if he comes back with something worse than anger?" My stomach dropped, cold and heavy, because I knew the answer. If Richard couldn't win with words or force, the next time, he might come back with something far more dangerous. The house felt like it was holding its breath. The shattered glass on the floor glittered like a warning, a reminder that Richard's rage wasn't finished. It was only waiting for its next chance. Daniel sat beside me on the couch, still pale, his eyes darting to the door every few seconds. James paced the room, running a hand through his hair again and again, his face tight with worry. "He's not going to stop," James muttered, more to himself than to us. "You saw him. That wasn't a man ready to give up. That was a man planning his next move." I nodded, my arms still wrapped protectively around the bag. "That's what scares me." Daniel's voice trembled. "What if he comes back with a weapon?" The thought made my stomach twist. Richard had always relied on fear and fists, but desperation changes people. And now that he'd lost control of us here, I feared what he might do to win it back. James stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Mom, we can't just sit here and wait. We need to do something. Go to the police. File a report. Anything. I hesitated. For years, I had kept quiet, endured in silence to protect my boys from the storm of publicity and shame. But now, keeping silent felt like an invitation for Richard to destroy what little peace we had left. You're right, I said softly. I should have gone to them a long time ago. Daniel looked at me with wide eyes. So we will? We'll go tomorrow? Yes, I whispered, though my chest tightened with fear. Tomorrow. But deep down, I wondered if we had until tomorrow. Outside, a car passed on the street, its headlights flashing briefly through the broken doorframe. Daniel flinched. James moved quickly to board the door with a chair, but it felt like trying to stop a flood with a piece of paper. None of us slept that night. Every sound outside, every groan of the house, felt like Richard returning. We sat together in the dim light of the living room, too afraid to separate, too tense to speak. As dawn's first light crept through the curtains, exhaustion tugged at my body. My sons sat close, their faces pale but determined. I felt the weight of the bag in my lap, and knew the battle had reached its final stretch. Because Richard wouldn't stay away. And the next time he came back, it wouldn't just be shouting, broken doors, or shattered glass. It would be the fight that decided everything. Morning light did little to ease the tension. My hands ached from clutching the bag all night, as if letting it go for even a second would bring Richard crashing through the door again. Daniel leaned against me, half asleep but restless, while James sat near the boarded-up entrance, eyes fixed on the street as though expecting a war. None of us had the strength to pretend. We were waiting for him. And by mid-morning he came. The roar of Richard's truck echoed before we saw it. Gravel crunched under heavy tires, then silence. A door slammed. Heavy footsteps approached. Daniel sat up, his eyes wide. Mom! I squeezed his hand. Stay calm. Stay together. The footsteps reached the porch, steady and deliberate. Then came the voice, deep, cold, stripped of the charm he sometimes wore like a mask. Margaret. Boys. Open the door. James's fists clenched. If we don't open, he'll break it down again. Not this time, I said. We're not giving him control. The handle rattled, then slammed hard against the frame. The chair wedged beneath it creaked but held. Richard growled low in his throat. Fine. If you want it this way, then we'll do it my way. We heard the sound of metal scraping. My blood ran cold. A crowbar. James jumped to his feet. He's serious. We have to call the police now. I nodded, grabbing the phone with shaking hands. But before I could dial, the first strike landed. Wood splintered, the chair shuddered. Daniel cried out and covered his ears. I pressed the phone to my ear, my voice trembling as I spoke to the dispatcher. This is Margaret from Millfield, Indiana. My ex-husband is breaking into my home. Please send someone fast. The operator's calm voice promised help, but her words felt far away, drowned out by the violent crash of the crowbar splitting the door. James grabbed a baseball bat from the corner. He stood ready, trembling but fierce. If he gets through, I won't let him hurt you. No, I said firmly. That's what he wants, for you to fight him, for you to become like him. Stay behind me. Another slam. The door burst halfway open, splinters flying across the floor. Richard shoved through, his face twisted with rage, the crowbar in his hands. Give me the bag, he roared. I stood tall, clutching it to my chest. No. You'll never have it. His eyes burned into mine, wild and desperate. You're destroying me, Margaret. You're destroying this family. You destroyed it yourself, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. The day you chose fear over love. He charged forward, crowbar raised. My scream filled the air. Then James stepped between us, bat lifted. Dad, stop, he shouted. You take one more step and I swear I'll swing. Richard froze, his chest heaving. His eyes locked on James, his son, his blood, his mirror. For the first time I saw hesitation. You wouldn't, Richard snarled, though his voice wavered. James's hands trembled, but his eyes burned with something new. Strength. Conviction. I will. Because I'm done letting you control us. I'm done letting you hurt her. If you can't be our father, then you're nothing to us. Daniel stepped up beside him, his small frame trembling but his voice steady. He's right, Dad. We don't need you if this is all you are. Richard's face cracked, fury and pain colliding. He looked at them, his sons standing together defying him, and for a moment the crowbar shook in his grip. Then sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed against the broken door. Richard's head snapped toward them, his eyes wide. He knew his time was up. Cowards, he spat, his voice trembling with rage. Hiding behind the law, hiding behind lies. He dropped the crowbar with a heavy clang. This isn't the end. You'll all see. Officers stormed in, weapons drawn. They ordered him to the ground. Richard fought with words, with curses, but in the end they pinned him, handcuffed him and dragged him out. His shouts faded as the truck carried him away. Silence filled the house once more. Daniel collapsed into my arms, sobbing. James dropped the bat and leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. I held them both, my own tears falling freely. It's over, I whispered, though my voice shook. It's finally over. But even as I said it, I knew the scars would remain. Richard's shadow would linger in memory, in the fears that would surface on quiet nights. Yet in that moment, with my sons clinging to me, I also knew something else. We had survived. Together. Later, after the police took our statements and the broken door was taped off, James sat across from me, his face pale but calm. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I doubted you. I doubted everything. I reached across the table, taking his hand. You needed to find your own truth. And you did. Daniel sniffled, leaning against James. We're together now. That's what matters. I smiled through my tears, holding their hands in mine. Yes, that's what matters. Love survived where fear tried to destroy us. The lesson was carved deep in me. Silence had been my prison, but truth became our freedom. And though Mother's Day had been the day my sons nearly destroyed me, it also became the day they finally stood with me. The day we chose love over fear. So if you're listening now, wherever you are, let me leave you with this. Don't bury the truth thinking it will protect those you love. Lies only give darkness room to grow. Speak. Stand. Even when your voice trembles. Because silence may protect for a moment, but truth heals for a lifetime. And to my viewers, thank you for staying with me through this story. My name is Margaret, speaking from Millfield, Indiana, and I'm 70 years old. If you found strength, hope, or even a lesson in my story, please subscribe, like, and click the notifications button so you don't miss the next one. And before you go, tell me, what part of the country are you watching from? I'd love to know where my story has reached. Because maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else choose love over fear before it's too late.